And straightway he constrained the disciples to get into the ship to go to the other side before unto Bethesda, while he sent away the people. And when he had sent them away, he departed to a mountain to pray. Now, if you look at what is happening here, this is just after the feeding of 5,000 people, and after he feeds the 5,000 people, he decides he wants to get away. He decides he gets to get away. Not only that, but he also tells his disciples to go to the other side of Bethesda. And during this time, now if you turn your Bibles to Psalm 34, Psalm 34 verse 4. Psalm 34:4. And just to kind of get an idea, you imagine how Jesus and his disciples and his apostles felt, having fed the 5,000 people, and they were already working hard before they came in. All these people come unto them and they want to hear Jesus preach, and there's not enough food for everybody, and they get into a situation where they don't know what to do. They get into the dilemma of how they're going to feed all these people, and finally, they feed all the people. They feed the 5,000 people with 5 loaves and 2 small fishes, and after they had done that, you imagine they must have been pretty tired. Being around all those people all the time. I would think. I mean, who likes being around a crowd of 5,000 people for a long period of time? I mean, I know that there's many people who aren't a big fan of crowds. I remember being at some sporting events when there's like large crowds, and once you finally get away from that crowd, you realize just how tiring it is. Or sometimes just get out of the crowd is extremely tiring. Sometimes I'd get home from after being in a large crowd, and I'm just like, I would be exhausted. And Jesus sends his disciples to go to the other side of Bethesda. So he sends them to the other side of Bethesda, and he departs to go pray. He departs to go pray. And I think that what Jesus is doing, he's trying to basically rejuvenate his energy. Mm-hmm. He's trying to get back something that he's lacking, he's deficient. Kind of like when your gas tank in your car runs out of gas, you got to fill that gas up. And when a person is hungry, they need food. When a person is thirsty, they need something to drink. And I believe Jesus at this point is at a point where he needs to be recharged, spiritually. He needs to have that. He needs to be in the presence of the Father. And it says in Psalm 34:4, it says, I sought the Lord, and he heard me and delivered me from all my fears. They looked unto him and were lightened, and their faces were not ashamed. The poor man cried, and the Lord heard him and saved him out of all his troubles. The angel of the Lord encampeth round about them that fear him, and delivereth them. Basically, what the psalm is saying here, he's saying, I sought out the Lord, and he heard me. He delivered me from my fears. He took away the distress that was in me. He was able to basically give me comfort. He was basically able to answer the needs of my soul. He was able to take away my fears. He was able to make me feel like I had my head above water again. And I believe that's why Jesus is going out to pray, is because he needs to be recharged. And you think about some of the things people spend their time on these days. They'll spend their all kinds of time on YouTube, Facebook. They'll spend, even young kids will spend a lot of time with their friends, and they're texting people, and they're on the internet. But the bottom line is, you can spend some time in those things, but eventually you need to get away, and you need to go out and pray like Christ did. You need to get away from the world, and you need to get and spend some time with the Father. You need to spend some time with the Son and the Holy Spirit. And I remember, just back in I think it was 1996, and I really wasn't saved at the time, and I remember hanging out with some people. There's some people from my high school, and to be honest with you, I didn't really, not to say that I don't like people, but I didn't really like these people. I thought maybe I did like these people, but I don't know. I'm not saying they're bad people, right? But let's face it, some people do the wrong things, and some people aren't great company, right? Mm-hmm. And I remember spending some time with these people, I didn't feel comfortable. I didn't feel comfortable. I didn't like being around him. And finally I decided, I'm going to get out of here. But the bottom line why I was with those people is I wanted a fellowship in a sense. I wanted friends. I wanted to feel like people cared for me. I wanted to feel like people loved me. I wanted to have a good time. I wanted to be like, let's face it, you don't want to sit around alone all the time, right? No one wants to sit around. Isn't it fun to be around people and have a good time?
Yeah.
It is, right? It's fun to be around people and have a good time. However, I didn't experience that at all, really. And when I finally got away from them, I just went out and I walked home that day. It was really far, right? It was a far walk. And I decided I was going to walk like a totally different direction. And I just started to go, and I just started to talk to God. I was walking down the street. I was just, talking to God. I was just telling God about, what I was going through. All of a sudden, at that time, I felt God's presence. I felt like God was listening. I felt like God heard me. And at the time, like I said, I wasn't saved, but I believed in Jesus. I believed in God. And that, to me, that was greater than the experience I had with those people. In fact, he was able to take all the pain that I had and all the fact that I felt like I couldn't relate to people, all the fact that I felt like, why am I like almost 18 years old? I feel like I don't have many friends, and I feel like I don't fit in the world. But when I went out and spent some time actually walking down that street and talking to God and telling him about what I was going through, that all went away. That all went away, and I felt normal again. I felt good again. I think Jesus, being around so many people, not that Jesus didn't like these people, but they probably presented some challenges to him. He needed to get away and go to the Father. He needed to get away and spend some time with God, and that's what Jesus is doing here. Now, continuing on here at Mark 6:47. Mark 6:47. It says, and when he was come, just depart here. Mark 6:47. It says, when even was come, the ship was in the midst of the sea, and he alone on the land. That's the ship that he sent his disciples in. So the ship was in the sea, he was alone, was in the land, and he saw them toiling and rowing, for the wind was contrary unto them, and about the fourth watch of the night he cometh unto them, walking upon the sea, and would have passed by them. So, if you turn your Bibles quickly just to Mark chapter 6, just to get some additional context, John chapter 6, to get some additional context in the story that Mark doesn't really provide, and John 6:16. John 6:16. And it says in John 6:16, it says, and when even was now come, his disciples went down unto the sea, and entered into a ship, and went over the sea toward Capernaum. And it was now dark, and Jesus was not come to them. And the sea arose by a reason of a great wind that blew. So it's saying that when they're here in the sea here, when the disciples were in the sea. Hey, good morning. When the disciples were in the sea, the sea rose by the sea. The sea wasn't very. It was a bit of a hostile environment while they're in that sea, and it says it was now dark, and Jesus was not come to them. The context being that they expected Jesus to be there, but he wasn't yet come to them. And the context to me, it seems to be that they were expected that Jesus was be there, and he wasn't come yet. And so here we have Jesus. He sent them out into the sea, and they're in the sea, and they're toiling and rowing. Things aren't looking good. Jesus is not there yet. Yet Jesus sent them there. And you imagine how they felt, right? They probably felt like, what's happening here? I don't know. I don't think too many people want to be in the midst of the sea and have the boat, going this way and going that way. And I think sometimes Jesus or God sends us somewhere. Jesus sends us somewhere, and sometimes the environment can be hostile, right? And I think sometimes Jesus or God, we believe God wants us to do something, and we get put into a situation where the environment's not very favorable for us, and it's a bit of a hostile environment. I think of the last time I gave my dad the gospel. It was the last time I gave my dad the gospel. I believe that my dad brought the conversation up, so I knew that, hey, this was time for me to do something about what there was not the time to sit still and hold my peace. And it was not a good conversation. It went real bad. It was real bad. And my dad had been on some medication, some pain-killing medication, and he seemed like, when someone's had alcohol, right? I mean, when someone's had alcohol, they're likely to say things that they wouldn't usually say, but they really, they're really thinking. And he's actually in a lot of pain, so I'm not blaming him for being on that medication or saying he was like drunk, but he really laid out what he thought to me. So since he really laid out what he thought to me, I kind of had to really lay out what I thought to him. And it was bad, man. It was not, it wasn't good. But the bottom line is, was that God's will or not? That was God's will. And it was God's will, it was Jesus' will that the disciples would be out in the sea. And, the sea wasn't a good place to be. They weren't comfortable. And I think they expected Jesus would be there, but he wasn't there yet. But the bottom line is, even when God puts us in a circumstance, I believe that God's going to put us in some circumstances, and we're getting in that circumstance, and it's not going to look like we wanted it to look. But we got to trust and wait, we got to wait for Jesus really to come around. Because he's going to come around eventually. The Holy Spirit eventually is going to come around. If he's put us and he called us into that situation, eventually he's going to do something to help relieve us in that situation. Now, continuing on here, Mark 6:49. Mark 6:49. Mark 6:49, it says, "But when they saw him walking upon the sea, they supposed it had been a spirit, and cried out. For they all saw him and were troubled. And immediately he talked with them, and saith unto them, Be of good cheer, it is I, be not afraid. And he went up unto them into the ship, and the wind ceased. And they were sore amazed in themselves beyond measure, and wondered. For they considered not the miracle of the loaves, for their heart was hardened." So, just the interesting sequence of events here is that Jesus, of course, just previously had, they had fed the 5,000 with the 5 loaves and 2 fishes. So Jesus had performed this great miracle. He sends them out into the sea. He doesn't go right away. And bad things start to happen. They see Jesus walking on the sea. You imagine how they felt, like, what's going on here? No man has ever walked on the sea but Jesus. No man will ever walk on. I don't believe any man will ever walk on the sea again, but Jesus. And when they saw him, they were afraid. They thought he was a spirit. They said they saw him. So I think at first glance, they probably thought, "Hey, Jesus walked on the sea." But they're not expecting he would do that. They were afraid. They were afraid, basically. And Jesus eventually he gets onto the ship, and then the wind ceases and everything's fine again. And they're in this kind of state of shock.
Amen.
They're in this state of shock. And it says, they consider not the miracle of loaves, for their heart was hardened. The bottom line is actually, they really shouldn't have been shocked, because Jesus had just done a great miracle. Mm-hmm. And this is, their heart was hardened. Even after Jesus had did this great miracle, when they see him walking on the sea, and when they see him get on the ship, and the wind ceases and everything's fine again, they're basically in a state of shock. Their heart was hardened. They forgot about what Jesus can do. They forgot what Christ can do. And that's just really, that example is just I believe that example is our lives. We see, I know I've talked about this before, but we see God come through in our life at some point in a great way. And then we get into a bad situation and things aren't going well, the circumstances aren't favorable. You can apply this to anything, your job, your life, your marriage, your Christian, your walk, or whatever. And then you forget so easily what he did for you in the past. We forget so easily, and then he does something miraculous again, and you're in that state of shock. Who's ever been there when God does something and you're almost like you see it with your eyes, but you don't quite believe it? I've been there many times, right? And it just shows us, I know I preached a sermon last year, how our hearts are so easily hardened, and our hearts are so easily hardened. We still got this flesh. And so often we'll forget about what God did for us in the past. Amen. And our heart will get hardened. And now, just to kind of give an interesting story here, my wife had asked me, she'd asked us to pray for this person, Annie Marionette Augustine, in church, about a month ago or so. and I believe she's I believe you've been praying for her, right?
Yeah.
I believe other people have been praying for her. Fortunately, I had kind of forgotten, and my wife told me last week. She goes, "Can you keep praying for her?" And basically, what happened is she had like stage 2 brain cancer. And I guess, correct me if I'm wrong, sweetheart. Correct me if I'm wrong, but she went to the doctor, and basically they can't find the cyst or the aneurysm anymore. Is that right? They can't.
First, it went down to stage 1.
But they can't find the cyst anymore on the brain,
and then
right?
they cannot find anymore.
So they can't find the evidence of what happened, right?
Yeah.
So my wife had told me last week. So she says, keep praying for her because she has stage 2 cancer, brain cancer, and now they can't find the cyst that was there anymore, and it's down to level 1. And when I literally heard that, you be honest, I'm just a man, I'm just like everyone else. I was like, whoa, that's crazy, because I know my wife was praying for. I know the other people were asking. It was my wife's friend who's Christian. Who they're all. I'm sure there's a number of people praying. But that's really God. That's really God. To be honest with you, the first thing I thought was like shock, because that's brain cancer. I mean, that's serious, especially if it's to that level. But here we see this receding. The doctor's probably baffled, and that's God. That's God doing something again. And when I hear that, I'm like, that's exciting. I mean, my wife she brought that up in church, but the fact that I was in a state of shock, I mean, that's a bit of a hardened heart, and I believe all of us can get that way. But God is continually going to be there. He's going to continually be there in our lives. It doesn't mean that we're not going to go through some bad things. It doesn't mean that it doesn't mean that your life might end tragically. But when you get to heaven, it'll all be better. The bottom line is just to keep in mind that, hey, think about the things God did for you and your life before today and years past. Realize he's gonna come through again, and he's gonna come through in a great way. Now, if you turn your Bibles just to kind of get some additional context on this, Psalm 95 verse 8, not Psalm 95 verse 8. Psalm 95 verse 8. Psalm 95 8, and it says, harden not your heart, as in the provocation, as in the day of the temptation in the wilderness. When your fathers tempted me, proved me, and saw my work, 40 years long was I grieved with this generation, and said, it is a people that do err in their heart, and they have not known my ways, unto whom I swear in my wrath that they should not enter into my rest. And in the book of Psalms here, the psalmist is saying, he's saying, harden not your heart. And just to kind of give some additional context to this, this idea here about not hardening your hearts. I mean, think about the children of Israel, coming out of Egypt. I mean, they got to see one of the greatest miracles that man has ever seen. Being, literally God took, more than 500,000 people, or 600,000 plus people who were slaves in Egypt. He took them out of Egypt. He did great miracles, and he did great wonders in Pharaoh's eyes. You imagine living during that time. That would, to me, that would be one of the most exciting times to live and be in Egypt at that time. I mean, it's so exciting that literally a mixed multitude also followed after the children of Israel. Yeah. Might have been probably excited. What's going on here? I'm coming too. And not only did he take them, not only did he show those great signs in Egypt, all those great plagues against Pharaoh, but literally gets them to a point where they're cornered between the sea and Pharaoh's army, who's going to take them. And then God literally, opens up the Red Sea, and they get to walk over on dry land, and a pillar of cloud guides them by day, right? And a pillar of fire by night. Imagine that miracle. Imagine experience that. Imagine seeing that. I mean, you're not seeing people when they saw Jesus, they saw God manifest in the flesh. They saw, God in the flesh, and that should have been unbelievable. But these people don't see God, but they clearly see the hand of God and the action of God in their lives acting. I mean, ask yourself the question: have you ever seen the hand of God and the actions of God acting in your life, and it was apparent to you that was happening? Mm-hmm. For sure, right? But is that an everyday occurrence? No. Because we've all had levels of extremes where we experience something that was extreme to that degree, and then we don't maybe experience something to that degree again. There may be there was that what they experienced there was the extreme of their life. They'll never, the people who experienced going over the Red Sea and seeing all the great miracles that God had did, all the great wonders God had did in Egypt, they never saw God act in such a way ever again. But basically, they got over the Red Sea on dry land, and then they start doubting God. They start doubting all kinds of things about God, and their heart got hardened. God's saying that's something just to be alert for, and I believe that many Christians, I believe many Christians will stop coming to church because they see, first of all, they see God act in their life, and that drives them to church, or they run to church wanting God to do something in their life, and they get to church and God does something in their life, and then God gives them some challenges. It's not all he wants to try them. He wants to increase their faith and strengthen their faith, and then all of a sudden things aren't going so well again, and they fall out, and their heart gets hard, and they forget about that God is going to do something. But it's so important that we don't get to that. Now Psalm 59:9 says, because of His strength will I wait upon Thee, for God is my defense. And I believe that we gotta no matter what we're going through, we got to realize God's strong, and we got to wait on Him. He's our defense. Amen. In Psalm 15 it says, and call upon me in the day of trouble, and I will deliver thee, and thou shalt glorify me. Now I ask you this question, how many times is when you're in real trouble that you call upon God and He answered? I know that when things get real tough for me, God answers. Amen. And sometimes, I know that when things get real deep for me and real hard, God answers. I've heard many stories. I've heard many stories. Brother Jay had given his story one time after church about what God did for him when he didn't have a place to live, and that to me we got to remember these things, and because God does these things for a reason. He wants us to remember these these things that He's done. Now let's continue on here to Mark 6:53. Mark 6:53. It says, when they had passed over, they came into the land of Gennesaret and drew to the shore. And when they were come out of the ship, straightway they knew Him, and ran through the whole region round about, and began to carry about in beds those that were sick, where they heard He was. And whithersoever He entered into villages or cities or country, they laid the sick in the streets, and besought Him that they might touch, if it were, with the border of His garment. And many as had touched Him were made whole. So when they get off that ship, a bunch of people come to them. Now the thing is, this is just after the feeding of 5,000. So Jesus has done another great miracle, and more people are hearing this. Word of mouth is powerful, right? I mean, before the internet, word of mouth still spread a lot news quickly. Even before the internet, even before people had this kind of technology, word of mouth spreads pretty fast. People have heard about Jesus, and they're hearing about all the people He was healing, all the great things that He was doing, and that's why so many people were coming to Him. Now, if you turn your Bibles to 1 John chapter 4, 1 John chapter 4 verse 8, 1 John chapter 4 verse 8, 1 John 4:8. And it says in 1 John 4:8, it says, he that loveth not knoweth not God. That says, for God is love. And jumping down to verse 16, it says, and we have known and believed the love that God hath to us. God is love, and he that dwelleth in love dwelleth in God, and God in him. But in 1 John 4:8 and 16, it's saying here that God is love. And at the end of the day, God is the epitome of love. And it doesn't mean that he doesn't have a wrathful side also. God is angry at the wicked, but God is the epitome of love. I mean, if you haven't known God, you haven't known love. If you haven't been saved, you really haven't known love. But God is love, and I believe that these people, Jesus being God manifest in the flesh, the Son of God, knew God was love. They saw the love that Jesus had. I mean, Jesus had compassion on the people. They had, as sheep having not a shepherd. When he healed the people, he had compassion on them. When he loved the people, and this is something that I believe as Christians that we can all do a little better on. That we can all express that love to the lost or to whoever a little better. I mean, your brother here, when you were going out soul winning yesterday, and you're giving them God the gospel, you're saying, hey, look, we're doing this because we love you, because we care about you. Even after I remember, one of the guys was an old guy, And when you're old and you don't know when your days are up, you're like one step away from hell, and like literally one step away from hell.
Amen.
And this man looked like he was about to jump into hell, because when Yuri or myself had presented them the gospel, he was just totally rejected. He said, I don't want to hear anything about that. Brother Yuri said, look, we bring this to you because we love you. And obviously that's the only reason we're bringing it. We don't bring the gospel to people's house who don't want to hear us because we don't care for them. Although if we didn't care for them, we just say, I don't want to deal with that. I'll just stay home. It's easier just to stay home. But the bottom line is, Jesus, love people, and I obviously when we look at the Independent Fundamental Baptist Church, we go there for a reason, right? We go to Independent Fundamental Baptist Church because the doctrine, right? It's not because of the name or the label. It's because we believe the authority of the Bible. We believe that Jesus was the Son of God. We believe that Jesus was God manifest in the flesh. We believe in salvation by grace through faith, etc., etc. And the doctrine's usually pretty good in Independent Fundamental Baptist Church, right? Never perfect. No church is perfect. But I've looked at some other churches I've gone to. Now I remember one of the church I got baptized at, and it wasn't an Independent Fundamental Baptist Church, but it was a Baptist church. But one thing I noticed about the people there, I remember standing at the back, and I had been baptized. The church I went to had borrowed their church to do some baptisms, and I was kind of waiting in the back. I can't remember, I was waiting for a ride or something like that. And all the people, as their service was coming in, so we did our baptism really early in the morning. Their service was like at 11 in the morning. We did the baptism at like 10 in the morning, so I was waiting at the back while their main service was coming in. And all the people were coming in were like shaking my hand and being like super friendly with me. Or they're like being real nice. I'm like, what's going on here, right? And like people are just walking up to me, hey, how you doing? Hey, how you doing? And it's like, wow, this is like, these guys were like, I felt like these people are acting like Christians. That's what I'm saying. I felt like, wow, if this is Christianity, I mean, this is a great testimony for the church. I don't know let's say you don't know the church's doctrine, but you go in there and everyone's caring and everyone's loving you and everyone's introducing themselves to you. And I was loving it. I started to like, people would come in, I got into it. And I'm like, I started to, like, people come out like, hey, how you doing, right? And eventually, and it was going pretty good. Eventually I got to one guy. I'm like, hey, how you doing? Hey, how you doing? And he looks at me like, who the heck are you? And I was like, okay, well, whatever, right? This is one guy. But the reason I'm bringing this up is because how many people, I've been to some churches that aren't Independent Fundamental Baptist churches, maybe before you started to go to an Independent Fundamental Baptist, or maybe you went to a Brethren church, or maybe you went to just a Baptist church. But one thing I've noticed about some other churches is just how friendly and how loving they are. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the thing that I believe that just Independent Fundamental Baptist churches, we need a little bit more of that. Because we focus so much on doctrine and trying to get things right biblically, but sometimes I believe we lose that edge. And the bottom line here is in 1 John 4, verse 8 and 4 verse 16, it says, God is love. Meaning that He is love. He is the epitome of love. By this show them and know that you're all my disciples, that if you have love one to another, Jesus has said. And I believe this is something that we all could get better at. And by getting better at it, we're going to have actually more joy. And I try to do my best at that. I try to, but I remember at one point in our church, after we'd actually just moved to the community center. We started off in the east end, of we're like the East York. We first moved to the community center. I had a visitor come in. I went out soul winning, and I told him, hey, we're going to meet in this neighborhood next week. And he came out, and he was a black guy. Now, I'm not centering out people who are black or white or Chinese or whatever, right? I feel like I have the liberty to say that in this church. People aren't going to say, hey, look, you can't say those types of things. But he came in, and I had believed that I got him to pray. I gave him the gospel, and he came in. I was excited to have him come in. But one thing I noticed about the church, people weren't even talking to him. Yeah. People weren't talking to him. Mm. Now, a lot of people at the time, I remember when we first started church, a lot of people right after I preached, they'd be talking to me, right? And sometimes I go out, I'm so tired after preaching, you ever see me. But, and I was like, I'm seeing this guy, I'm like, I gotta go talk to that guy, Nobody's talking to him. And so I started to introduce him to one person. I said, hey, so-and-so, did you meet Mr. X? I mean, Mr. John. I'm not going to use his real name because maybe, I don't know, someday he's listening. And he's like, yeah, I met him. I just couldn't believe it. I mean, where's the love there? You have, here we have a church that's been around for 5 months. We moved into a new neighborhood. We got a visitor out. And nobody's going out to reach out to him. Everyone's caring for their own. I'm just here for my own reasons. I'm not going to bother reaching out to them. And we had some other people too. We had some people who are of a poor sort, in the poor. They lived in that neighborhood, and they come to the church. It was a family, and they were poor. They weren't they weren't middle class. And I felt like a lot of times it was one other guy who would pick them up. He would go and pick them up and drive them to church, even if we told him not to. Like, we usually call, hey, you coming? But he would go anyway, even if I didn't say, can you go pick them up? Because he wanted them to come. He cared about them. But there are a lot of other people never bothered to say hi to them, never bothered to show them love. Hey, one of the kids didn't have a father. Their father was in another country. That's not love. That's not showing love to people. I believe we got to show that love. People came to Jesus because he showed them love. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's the letter killeth, but the spirit maketh alive. I mean, that's more important even than teaching them. We should teach people the Bible, but more important, just show them love, man. And that's what we need, and I believe that we got to do that, and I believe it's so important. And I believe sometimes I think we lose. Who's ever been to a church where you felt like the vision of that kind of got messed up, or a little maybe not done as well? And I know myself going to churches when I wasn't running this church, and sometimes I went in there being like maybe self-centered and thinking, I'm just gonna go and sit down and I'll talk to who I want to talk to. Not a good attitude to have, and we've all fallen into it. Anyway, we're getting there in prayer. Dear Lord God, thank you for the opportunity, God, to go over Mark chapter 6.